Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Darby's Cafe by Cori Cooper, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Timid young blonde, TYB, seeks the guts to talk to the hottie at work. Maybe he could make the first move? Otherwise, this might take a while. She wasn't a stalker. Darby dared any red-blooded woman in the world not to stare at Miles Cook, with her mouth hanging half open and her tongue wagging out. It was impossible. He was just so dang beautiful. His blue eyes behind those black hipster glasses were bright and swoony. The way he focused all his attention on the newspaper in his hands made Darby feel just a teensy bit jealous of the newspaper. What woman doesn't want a man to stare at her for almost an hour like she's the most interesting thing in the room? As yummy as his eyes were, his lips were even better. Sometimes when he read, he'd mouth the words. Darby spent an enormous amount of time when she was supposed to be wrapping utensils and napkins trying to decipher what he was reading based on the shapes his lips made. Every once in a while, he ran his hand through his blonde, wavy hair, wrecking the perfect Ken doll gel job. The best part happened next, when one stubborn lock dropped back into his eyes. Darby dreamed of one day reaching over and smoothing that lock into place for him. Or even better, transforming herself into that lock of hair just so he had to brush her with his fingers. Okay, that was a little weird. Borderline pathetic. Actually, the whole crush was pathetic. She was pathetic. Miles had come into the corner cafe every morning at precisely 7:30 for the last 6 weeks, and the only reason Darby knew his name was because she rummaged through the register to find his credit card receipt after he left that first day. Pathetic. And okay, yes, fine. She was a little bit of a stalker. She sighed and dropped the last utensil roll into the bin under the counter. And missed. Of course. Because nothing ever went smoothly for her. Because, oh, yeah, the universe hated her. Darby squatted to pick it up, hoping that her boss Greta hadn't noticed. The napkin would have to be thrown away and the utensils washed again, just in case any part of them touched the dirty floor. Greta wouldn't like that at all. As Darby rose, she misjudged where the mugs were and knocked them with her elbow. This set off the coffee mug symphony orchestra, which meant Darby's chances of going unnoticed just tanked hard. Darby let out a long breath as she steadied the mugs with one hand. They were quiet now. She was just stalling to put off the moment she had turned around and faced Greta. Greta and her gremlin face. Darby fixed a smile into place and spun around on her heel, careful to keep her elbows glued to her side. Greta was watching, of course, because there was no way Darby's crappy luck would let Greta be busy when something embarrassing happened. Crappy luck was pretty consistent that way. Greta's lips pressed into a thin line. I need you to pay better attention to what you're doing. I know, Darby nodded, gluing her eyes to Greta's face. Greta's voice only had one volume, loud, and Darby didn't want to see who else was witnessing her moment of shame. For the first time ever, she was glad Miles hardly ever looked up from his newspaper. The person at the counter is the first thing people see when they come into the corner cafe. They're going to judge the whole place by what you do. Any more of this? Greta swept a hand toward the mug display. And you're moving to the kitchen. Not the kitchen. Anything but the kitchen. Darby's face flushed. Greta probably thought the threat of scrubbing ovens and congealed pots was enough to scare Darby straight, but that wasn't it at all. She could wash dishes with her eyes closed. It was everything else about the kitchen that freaked her out. I get it. Darby scuffed her toe against the wilted vinyl. I'll be more careful. I hope so. Greta didn't look all that hopeful. Her gremlin face made it clear her expectations were dangerously low. The corner booth is free. You know what to do. Darby nodded again, not daring to point out that since she worked the counter, someone else, like Meredith, should clear the booth. Greta didn't love back talk, meaning any talk that contradicted what she said or thought. More than once since Darby started working at the cafe, she wished she could read Greta's mind. It was exhausting trying to guess what she was thinking all the time. Darby kept her eyes trained on the floor so they wouldn't sneak over to Miles as she walked by. Not even a peek. This was her penance for being such a spaz. The small family of four that previously occupied the corner booth was still making their way out of the cafe. Darby stopped to let them pass and then hurried to the table. That booth was a favorite spot, so Greta was a stickler for making sure it was always available as quickly as possible. Hey, Miles! Man, how are you? It's been forever! Darby ducked behind the high back of the booth and froze with her hands hovering over the stack of sticky, syrupy plates. When she got the guts to peek over the top, it was just in time to see two guys pull away from a very manly backslap hug. Are these your kids? Miles's eyes lit up as he leaned over to see the little girl at eye level. I'm Miles. I knew your daddy in high school. What's your name? Darby's heart pounded in her ears. Gorgeous and good with kids? Did he drop from heaven or what? The little girl hid her face in her mom's pant leg. It's okay, the dad said. Miles is super nice. Remember I told you about that time I hurt my leg real bad in football? Miles was the one who got me off the field. Oh, man, Miles laughed. I can't believe you still remember that. Of course I remember that. There was that 500-pound gorilla bearing down on me. He would have killed me if you hadn't pulled me out of the way. So, he poked his daughter in the arm, you should tell Miles thank you for saving your daddy's life. Gorgeous, good with kids, humble, and part superhero. Yes, please. Thank you. The little girl chanced one small glance at Miles, then scooted behind her mom. Her name is Sophie, the mom laughed, and usually we can't get her to stop talking. Maybe you should come over while we're trying to watch a movie or, have a conversation during dinner. Anytime. Miles swung his hair out of his eyes. The movement was so perfect. Darby was pretty sure her heart stopped beating for that 1 second. Man, it's good to see you, the dad said again. Do you still live in Hurricane? What are you doing? Yeah, I'm here for now. Miles' eyes shifted to his newspaper, a crease forming between his eyebrows. It was delicious. I was in the Bay Area for a couple years going to school, but now I'm back. Yeah, I think I remember that. Didn't you get a business degree? Wait, you started a business, didn't you? I think I heard that you started a business or something. I did. Miles chuckled at Sophie as she shrank down into a little ball behind her mom. It was pretty hilarious that little kids thought they could disappear by getting smaller, or they couldn't be seen if they had their eyes closed. Right now, Darby just wanted to shake that little girl's hand because hearing Miles chuckle that way pretty much made her day. Actually, her week. Okay, fine, her life. I actually have 3 businesses. I'm looking into starting a 4th somewhere closer to my parents. Gorgeous. Good with kids, humble, part superhero, successful, and family-oriented. Oh, Mama, Darby was a goner. Wow, man, look at you. The dad pulled out his wallet and rifled through it until he merged with a business card. Feel kind of lame now, but here, take my card and give me a call sometime. Yeah, we can hang out. And do dinner, the mom added. I was serious about that. She patted Sophie's back. Say goodbye to Miles, Soph, then waved the arm of the baby on her hip. Sophie mumbled into her mom's pant leg again, and everyone laughed. Darby stifled a gasp. Miles's eyes literally sparkled when he laughed. He was too good to be real, like fat-free ice cream. Or unicorns. What in the world are you doing? Darby jumped and fumbled with the skirt hem of her white linen uniform. What? Greta stood in front of the booth with hands on hips and a frown firmly in place. I said, what in the world are you doing right now, Darby Reynolds? Clearing up the booth? She didn't dare peek back at Miles with Greta watching her so closely, even though she wanted to very badly. Of course that's what I'm doing. We need to keep it clear, right? Greta's lips pressed into a thin line. It don't look to me like you were doing much more than staring holes in the back of that young man's head. Could Greta lower her voice for like 1 sentence? Just that 1 sentence. If Miles heard what she just said, Darby might actually die. No, I wasn't. I'm staring. Darby looked around for inspiration because telling her boss she was crazy but in love with a dude she hadn't even talked to was not an option. I was, forget it. Greta rolled her eyes. Just get that booth ready for the next group who walks in here. Of course. Darby dropped her head. Greta poked her finger close to Darby's nose. No more daydreaming, staring, or scheming. Got it? I wasn't. Greta walked away without looking back. Scheming. Darby sighed heavily. See, she just missed the end of the exchange with Miles and his high school buddy, as well as the part where Miles paid for his breakfast and left the cafe. Such a shame, really. Watching him walk away was her favorite part. In fact, walking away would become a positive thing if more people got to watch Miles do it. Dang, that boy could strut. Now all that was left of his presence in the cafe was the empty plate with crisscrossed utensils and a half-empty mug off to the side. Rotten luck. Her luck had always been rotten. The fact that it kept getting worse wasn't a shocker. It was disappointing, though. After all her pep talking and courage gathering before she came to work this morning, there was nothing to show for any of it. What a waste. Stupid luck. If she hadn't dropped the utensils and knocked the cups, she wouldn't have caught Greta's attention. Then she could have been at the counter when Miles looked up from his newspaper to talk to his old high school buddy. She could have grabbed his attention with something amazingly witty, and right now they'd be planning a vacation together in Aruba. So thank you, rotten luck. Thank you so much. Darby sighed again and started stacking plates on her forearm. She could get all these dishes into the kitchen in one go, then come back with a rag and have the table wiped down before Greta had a chance to huff for the third time. On second thought, she'd better make 2 trips. With her luck, she'd slip on something that appeared out of nowhere and break everything in her arms. Darby set half of the things back on the table and carefully picked her way to the kitchen, then returned for the rest of the dishes. As she headed back to the counter after dropping the second load off with the dishwashers, the bell over the door rang the next person into the corner cafe. Not just any person. Kenya. Today, she wore a long flowered skirt, a peasant blouse, a fringed suede vest over the top, and a bright yellow crocheted cap. Her long dark brown hair was straightened with a middle part that made her chocolate brown eyes look ginormous. A garish headband to keep all that hair from swinging in her face when she sat down at the counter. Darby glanced at Greta, who wrinkled her nose. You're working, don't you forget that, and if she ain't buying anything, she's got 5 minutes. I know. I remember. Thanks. Darby couldn't stop the smile from taking over her face as she met Kenya at the counter. Hey, are you finally done with work? Kenya nodded, plopping onto the stool. I am so wiped out. All that YMCAing and booty shaking, it's exhausting. 70s dancing is not slow, if you know what I mean. Darby had no idea what Kenya meant since she was born a full 20 years after the 70s were over. So was Kenya, for that matter. That's where the work part of Kenya's party planning business reared its head. She'd spent most of the last 2 weeks researching the 70s, then telling Darby all about it when she came in for breakfast. Darby was pretty sure the two of them knew more about the era than the people who lived through it. The rest of what Kenya did was technically play. I really think you have the funnest job in the world, Darby said, keeping one eye on Greta. When the woman started shifting, it meant she was losing patience. Throat clearing was a death sentence. Darby usually had a solid 5 minutes before the shifting started, but Greta seemed to be in an especially ornery mood today. Kenya's back curved into a C shape. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but after nights like this one, I'm thinking Costco would be a great career. Predictable hours, steady pay, same thing every day. Darby anchored her hand on her hip. Yeah, right. You wouldn't last a week at Costco or anywhere else. You'd be bored out of your mind. You think so? I know so. In fact, Darby would have bet money on it. Kenya was the opposite of predictable, steady, and consistent. That's partly why Darby loved her so much. Kenya was so different from herself. Talking to Kenya was kind of like living a vicarious life, one where she wasn't so dang scared to put herself out there again. You're right, as always. Kenya glanced over at the sad remains of Miles. Hey, where's Loverboy? Don't say that so loud, Darby hissed. Kenya didn't even lower her voice. Why not? Someone might hear you. Darby's eyes shifted down the counter. It was empty, but still. Kenya's eyes followed the same shift with the same result. I see what you mean. All these people listening in. I don't want Meredith to walk by and overhear. She's like an evil villain and gossip is her superpower. Whatever you say, she will hear, then totally misconstrue. Kenya still looked skeptical and leaned forward to whisper, Where's Loverboy? Gone, Darby whispered back. Already? Kenya frowned, then scooted over to the stool where Miles had been sitting. He's usually still here when I come in. She picked up his abandoned newspaper. You know, he's probably the only dude our age in the world who reads an actual newspaper, right? Super old school. Darby knew that was what caught her attention on her first day of work. The more she thought about him, and that happened pretty much constantly, the more she decided she loved that about him. Kenya fluffed the newspaper. Let's see what he was reading today, shall we? Darby moved down the counter along with Kenya to start clearing the dishes Miles used. The stoneware clanged together as Darby stacked things into and onto each other. What did you discover? Well, Kenya snapped the newspaper upright and peered closer. He's interested in this car for sale. See, it's all smudged right there. And this is interesting. Loverboy McHottieson likes him some personal ads. Nuh-uh. Darby leaned over the counter to look. They do not still run those things. They sure do. Listen to this. Kenya's voice lowered and took on a pompous accent. Elegant dame wanted, that's EDW for you laymen out there, middle-aged country boy who recently inherited a fortune, in need of a sophisticated woman to teach him how to navigate posh society. You are making that up. No, for real, look. Kenya pointed at the text. All true. Darby leaned back, a low whistle escaping through her teeth. I don't know if that is adorable or completely pathetic. Yeah, me neither. I just wish I knew which one of these ads your lover boy was drawn to. It would clue me in on who he really is. Based on which ads he was reading? Darby gave Kenya an incredulous look. People were more than what they read, watched, and listened to. At least Darby liked to think so. She would hate it if people judged her solely by her fetish for Hallmark movies. Nope, it's completely reliable. Kenya flicked the paper so it made a satisfying, crinkly noise. When I met Mitch, he was totally sucked into Steve Young's biography. Oh, yeah, Kenya's boyfriend Mitch was a total sports nut, but Darby was still skeptical. Mitch reading books about sports wasn't really who he was. It was what he was interested in. And a sports biography was way different from a newspaper. There was a cornucopia of information on just one page of the news. It would be impossible to figure out who a person was from the article on the school board's decision to move to year-round school to the article about the expected heat wave next week to the editorial on recycling. Oh, come on. Kenya swatted Darby's arm to get her attention. You're overthinking it. People are not that complicated. Do you think you could peek over Loverboy's shoulder tomorrow morning when he comes in to see which ads he reads? Do some surveillance? Darby could barely get her tongue off the roof of her mouth when he was in the cafe, so yeah, she sincerely doubted it. His cologne might send her into a swoon from which she would never recover. She shook her head as she reached for his mug and balanced it on top of the plates. Kenya pursed her lips together. I could have casually spied on him this morning if he hadn't left so dang early. What's up with that anyway? What happened? Darby clutched Miles's dishes and wished them with all her heart that she had something she could tell Kenya besides the truth. The truth stank. She was a buffoon, and Miles left without so much as glancing at her. Okay, maybe he glanced at her, but it didn't count because she didn't see it. Nothing. Such a desolate word. Nothing, nothing, nothing. You didn't talk to him? Greta cleared her throat loudly. Strike one. Both girls glanced her way, then leaned forward so they could talk lower and still hear each other. No. Why not? We had a great plan. You were going to take his order and then segue into what he was doing today. It was almost foolproof. Almost was the key word there. It was like the theme of Darby's life. Almost. Could have. If only. Kenya was right, though. The plan was foolproof, or it would have been foolproof if it wasn't for, Darby's luck. She wasn't about to bring that up to Kenya again. Kenya thought that luck was hooey. Of course, she'd only known Darby for like 11 months. That wasn't enough time to fully appreciate the scope of Darby's misfortunes. Aside from the luck thing, Darby wasn't all that great at talking to hot guys. Whenever she tried, words turned into toffee and stuck to the back of her teeth. In the silence, she just stared and blinked occasionally while her brain tried to figure out how to start working again. Kenya's voice softened. You chickened out? No! Okay, kind of. But really, it was the luck's fault. Stupid, rotten luck. Darby reached for the dishes on the counter. I better get these back to the dishwashers before the egg dries into concrete. The guys hate that. Be right back. Mm-hmm. Darby could feel Kenya's eyes follow her through the swinging doors to the kitchen. Since Kenya had the attention span of a squirrel, there was a good chance she'd forget what they'd been talking about by the time Darby got back. A girl could hope. Darby took an extra long time stacking the dishes next to the sink before she went back to the counter. When she returned, Kenya was sitting in her original spot, tapping a tune with her fingernails on the napkin dispenser. Darby raised an eyebrow as she walked by Kenya and went to greet the couple that had come in while she was lollygagging in the kitchen. She slapped the orders on the window for Samson, then returned to her friend. You chickened out, Kenya said immediately. Her voice was more matter-of-fact than it was judgy. Of course you chickened out. That's understandable. Miles is gorgeous. Everyone who went through middle school knows it's hard to talk to gorgeous guys. We need a better plan, that's all. Kenya bit the insides of her cheeks so that her face was all cheekbones. Maybe if you memorized some phrases, or maybe it would help if we rehearsed. I could totally be Miles. Darby snorted loudly and then covered her mouth, glancing over at Greta, who cleared her throat. Strike two, meaning Greta was almost out of patience. Darby shot Kenya a look. This was the one that said, if you don't order something right now, you're going to get tossed out of the cafe. Kenya got the hint and pulled a menu up right in front of her face. Yes, I'll have the garden omelet with country potatoes and orange juice. No biscuits and gravy? Darby raised an eyebrow above the order pad. The only thing consistent about Kenya was her addiction to biscuits and gravy. Darby didn't think Kenya had ordered anything else in all the time she'd been coming to the corner cafe. Not today, my good ma'am. I gotta go home and sleep after this. Biscuits and gravy would interfere. I'd end up gloriously stuffed, binge watching something stupid, then be super cranky at the sock hop tonight. Darby finished jotting down Kenya's order, then stuck it on the window into the kitchen. Sock hop? That sounds fun. It really did sound fun, of course, but more than that, it sounded awesome to change the subject away from her dismal failure with Miles. Darby tucked her notepad away, then reached under the counter for a clean glass to fill with orange juice. It is fun. Super fun. Sock hops are my favorite thing. Though, Kenya eyed the glass as it slowly filled. I gotta stop scheduling things back to back like this. I am so wiped out. Did I mention that? Hey, you should come tonight. Darby was already shaking her head. Oh, don't give me that look. It's a singles thing for the community. Anyone can come. Please? It would be so much more fun if you were there. Darby crossed her arms and leaned forward. Can't party all night and work all day, then go to school all evening. Just picture that. She held her arms out in front of her eyes half closed, and groaned her best zombie impersonation. Can I fill your eggs? How do you want your glass? Kenny got a case of the high-pitched giggles that made Greta start snapping her fingers in their direction like she was getting after a disobedient dog. It was lucky the cafe was bustling, keeping Greta busy schmoozing customers, or they would both be in for a tongue lashing. And no one tongue lashed like Greta. Okay, seriously, though. Kenny wiped away her smile with surprising ease. This is my serious face. Are you taking me seriously? I'm sure trying, Darby pursed her lips. Okay, because I got a call last night, or was it this morning? It's all a blur. Anyway, it's for a wedding reception in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Darby's eyebrows leaped. That's soon. Really soon. Don't people usually schedule stuff like that in months in advance? Probably should have. They also should have hired a professional caterer instead of a family friend who thinks they're an amateur chef. Ah, Darby nodded. That was a mistake. Even Darby, who had never been married or even close to it, knew people should never hire friends for wedding caterers or photographers. For some reason, those two things had a long history of tragedy. Kenya liked to joke about her sister-in-law, who'd been married to her brother for 12 years and still brought up their crappy wedding photos at every family dinner. And that friend had something come up at the last minute and can't do it. Well, that stinks, right? So they looked up every party-related business in southern Utah and made frantic phone calls until they found me. Kenya jabbed a thumb at her chest. Except there is one problem with this whole thing. Only one? Well, no, but only one at the moment. Kenya gave Darby a mock glare, and the problem is that it's a wedding party of 500. That's way too work for one little me, so I started thinking about people I could hire to help me out. If only there were someone who was an amazing chef who would be willing to cater the reception with me. Darby froze, her stomach clenching into a wall of concrete. A fiery chasm opened up in her mind. It was going to swallow everything. Kenya dropped all nonchalance and grabbed Darby's hand in a death grip. Please, Darbs, please, please, please. It would be so fun to work together, and I'd rather hire someone I can trust than call the temp agency again. Last time they sent some guy who thought getting baked and baking are the same thing. They are not, by the way. You'd be doing me the biggest favor. Me, your bestest friend in all of Hurricane. Don't say no, please, please, pretty please, say yes.